Just 4 more days until these rankings really matter. Sunday around noon, we'll learn the final college football playoff rankings for this year. That means we'll finally have the 4 playoff teams identified, and the semifinals set for December 28th. To be in those games, a bunch of teams got to win Saturday to give themselves a chance. Ohio State, LSU, Clemson, Georgia, the current top 4, but we can guarantee that top 4 is going to change in some way by Sunday afternoon. It is the most exciting week of the season so far. It happens Saturday. Championships at stake. Possibly 7, maybe 8 teams still with a chance to raise that big 35-pound gold trophy come January. I'm Jared Smalley. Thanks for joining us here live across our Nexstar family of stations for the Gridiron Nation, the path to the playoff. We're going to check in with experts all across the country here today. As Ric Flair, the professional wrestler, he famously said, "To be the man, you've got to beat the man." And no one has beaten Clemson. The defending national champs appear to have the most favorable road to the playoff this year. An incredible defense for the Tigers. They'll get Virginia in the ACC championship. That's Saturday night in Charlotte. And we go now to Spartanburg, South Carolina, to talk with Pete Yannity, the sports director at WSPA there. Pete, Clemson cruising through the back half of its season. They get Virginia. Virginia had to beat Virginia Tech this past week to get its spot opposite the Tigers in the ACC title game. They're 29-point underdogs. Do you think Virginia can even make a game of this thing?
You know, Jared, as mentioned in this space before, it's really hard to see anyone in the ACC comparing to this Clemson team. And that sounds like a very blunt point, but it really is the truth, because each conference game, with the exception of what has become the apparently milestone ball game this year, the North Carolina game, when a late 2-point conversion by the Tar Heels went for naught and Clemson got out of Chapel Hill with a 1-point win. But every other game has essentially had no mystery to it beyond the middle of the second quarter, at least within the conference. And frankly, the non-conference games pretty much were routes as well. And just, it's really something, if you look across the ACC stat sheet, if Clemson's not number 1, they're number 2, and in the 2 categories they're number 2 in, and that's rushing yards per game and passing yards per game. You can only wonder how much bigger their numbers would be had they left the starters in for all 4 quarters. For the most part, their starters haven't played in the final quarter in most of their games. But also the fact that the comparison of where Clemson leads in the very key categories, total defense, total offense, etc., turnover margin, they pretty much are either a football field ahead if it's a matter of yards. In terms of total points, they're 2 touchdowns better pretty much than anyone in the league. Points given up, they're 10 points better than the second team behind them, Miami. And in turnover margin, they're plus 11, which has them in the top 10 nationally. And that's pretty much double what anyone has done in the ACC. So they've been forcing them. They've been taking care of the football, especially since early October. And it's just staggering when you compare what this team has done compared to the rest of its league.
It's certainly, you're right, they've lapped the field, Pete. It's that simple. What has been fun to follow here for us on the outside, Dabo Swinney, he's been working the media on the point that Clemson's still ranked 3rd in the CFP, yet they are the defending national champs. Clemson's being slighted here. Do you really think, Pete, he believes that, or is he just using it all for motivational? What do you think the plan is here from Dabo?
He is a master motivator. He is a master salesman, and he'd be the first one to tell you that. And keep in mind, what many folks may not realize is when he took a 2-year gap out of coaching in the earlier part of the century, after he was out at Alabama with that staff there in the late 90s, right around 2000, for a couple of years, and in the 01 and 02 falls, he was a commercial real estate salesman, and he was incredibly successful at that. And what is Dabo's brand? What was his brand as an assistant and then as head coach? He's a great recruiter. He's great at convincing folks that there really is water in that desert. And so I think it's all part of an overall way to motivate his team. His players say, yeah, it gets us motivated when we hear him talking about that. But I will say this, at his news conference this week with the local media to get ready for the game against Virginia, he did say the words that I thought were I hadn't heard him say until that news conference, and I thought was kind of the underlying theme. He said, basically, he just wishes the national media would give his team the benefit of the doubt. So I think, and this is just me kind of deducing this, inferring it, whatever have you, I really think that he believes from the very first time the poll came out a few weeks back and all the way through to this point right now, his team should have been placed at #1 because they're unbeaten, riding the longest winning streak right now, active in the nation at 27 in a row, and the defending national champs who had blown out Alabama. I think in his world, he believes his team should have been given the #1 slot and not removed from it until they lose, and that kind of irks him a little bit because he says he just doesn't feel like his team gets the benefit of the doubt. An ACC around him is not helping his case. And, non-conference games against 2 SEC teams, one that they play every year, and then another one that they didn't have to schedule, Texas A&M, but did. But that's the thing. He's most upset about the fact that he believes his team should be given the same categorization, same respect as an Ohio State, as an LSU, and so on down the line.
They're held to a high standard, that is for sure. One last thing for you, Pete. I wanted to ask you about Travis Etienne, the running back at Clemson, who you don't necessarily hear a bunch about nationally. He's probably going to take a good look at going to the NFL next year, I'd imagine. In his 3 years at Clemson, he's rushed for nearly 4,000 yards. He averages more than 8 yards per carry. Not getting a lot of Heisman attention. But how critical is Travis to a Clemson repeat here? Because when we watch him play, he's dominant.
And when you want to add a little vinegar and salt to an open cut on Dabo Swinney's hand, just mention Travis Etienne and the national respect. Etienne didn't qualify and make the finalist list for the Doak Walker Award, which goes to the top running back, and that's something that all you have to do is say that to Dabo Swinney, and about an hour later he'll finish going off on a rant about that. And I'll tell you the thing about Travis Etienne, and I've seen a bunch of running backs play college football. I've seen a bunch of guys come through Clemson. He's always been a very impressive back. He was kind of undersized as a freshman and had some real issues in pass protection, which is why he didn't get on the field more earlier. But he's really improved that. He's bulked up in the past 2 years, as you would expect. But the thing about Etienne is that maybe doesn't have the blazing speed that'll overwhelm you, but he's really fast. And maybe he's not a guy you look at, you think he's going to run right over you, but he breaks tackles. And they had a great running back here a decade ago named C.J. Spiller, who's probably the most impressive physical specimen I've ever seen as a running back in terms of a human being, just being able to make others miss and that kind of thing. Travis Etienne doesn't necessarily have that shiftiness, but he still has the ability to make plays. And again, he's averaging over 8 yards a carry. He's on a historic pace there. In Saturday's game against South Carolina, he set a new ACC touchdown records in all categories. I mean, he did that in under 3 seasons playing. I'd be stunned if he comes back. Yeah, he probably is gone to the NFL. But that's a real centerpiece because you've got to respect him. You've got to fill the box with enough to respect that. And that only makes a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence better, and then the wide receivers he has around him.
Yeah, he's special. He is a difference maker when you watch him every game he plays. Pete Yannity, following the Clemson Tigers, thanks so much for joining us here on our run on the path to the college football playoff. Thank you very much, Pete. The #1 team in the nation, the Ohio State Buckeyes. People continue to try to give them their best shot, and so far, all they've done is crush people. On the road to their rivals this past weekend, they go up north. They're favored by 9. They won by 29. Michigan had no shot against that offense, which continues to lead the country in scoring. #1 total defense in America. They'll get a rematch with Wisconsin Saturday in Indy for the Big Ten title. We now bring in former Ohio State assistant coach and recruiting coordinator Bill Connelly to talk about that rematch we'll get here Saturday night in Indy. Let's first, though, talk about what we learned this past week in Ann Arbor. Michigan really, to their credit, they did a brilliant job containing Chase Young. You can debate the methods. There's some bear hugs on Chase there at times.
Absolutely.
But look, they didn't get called, and they threw for 250 yards in the first half because of that. So Ohio State couldn't get a pass rush home against Michigan. Yet Michigan lost by nearly 30. How do you explain that, Bill?
Well, I think you said it, first half. 2 different halves. Yeah. I mean, the first half, what they were really hitting, they were running a lot of what we call rub routes, underneath patterns, crossing routes. And our linebackers and some of the undercovers got mixed up and confused, but they got that corrected when the day went. So most of the passes early were short passes that they could get rid of real quick. The second half, completely different story. As our coverage increased, we ended up having 9 breakups in the secondary, and we also put more pressure on him, and they had to use 2 to 3 guys at times to block Chase Young, which freed up guys like Devin Hamilton and also Jonathan Cooper, who ended up getting to the quarterback. And even Chase Young himself had 2 hurries in the game, so his presence was felt Don't ever doubt it.
Well, we'll turn our attention now to the Big Ten title game, and here's what we know about Ohio State. They know that Wisconsin's good. They know that even though they beat them by 31 earlier this year, Bill, there's reason for Ohio State to be on alert here.
Yeah, and arguably they got the best linebacking core in the whole conference. Those guys are good, and they blitz from all over the place. They're leaders in sacks or two of the linebackers. So we got to do a good job protecting, our quarterback. At the same time, they can do the same thing.
And obviously, if you think Ryan Day is short-sighting this Big Ten title game, think again.
We have to go win this game, for a lot of reasons. And the Big Ten championship game is one of our goals, year in and year out. And so that's just the focus. And starting to, again, for me to speculate on all those things at this point right now doesn't really matter. I know we got a great team, and we just have to win this weekend. And then everything will take care of itself if we do that and focus on that, because the other speculation or talk or what if scenarios for us, for me, doesn't do us any good right now. So, again, just focus on that finish line.
So the Buckeyes are trying to get to 13-0 on this season and then get to the college football playoff. And here is the lump in your throat moment for Buckeye fans. Justin Fields Saturday hit in the third quarter on his left leg, which was already injured from the week before against Penn State. He's going to play Saturday, despite missing a slight amount of time in the Michigan game. He goes off to the sideline, goes to the tent, gets the most functional knee brace in America, apparently, throws the thing on, and throws a touchdown pass. So he's going to be on the field. Looks like Shaun Wade, the defensive back who didn't play against Michigan, probably will try to play against Wisconsin, so they're getting a little healthier. In part, was Wade's absence a reason why they had some pass defense problems?
Yeah, I think so early. Again, they took advantage of the youth there, the guys that weren't the starters. But again, we ended up playing a lot of guys in the secondary, and they got really better, and they knew actually after a few series what routes they were trying to throw, and our coverage got much tighter.
Yeah, it certainly did. Let's talk about Wisconsin, Bill. Look, it did not go well for them in Columbus, and that man, Jonathan Taylor, who is one of the better running backs in America, went for 52 yards in the first game. That cannot happen for Wisconsin to have a chance.
Yeah, the only way that they have a chance is they got to establish that running attack of theirs. They're in the top 20 in the country in rushing, but against Ohio State, he's never got it across the goal line, never rushed for over 100 yards, and even against Minnesota last week, he didn't rush for 100 yards. So, but that's part of it. But again, they're going to have to throw the football too, and they're 96th in the nation in pass.
Yikes.
So that's not good.
Yeah, something to work on. They got a great defense, and that keep them in the game.
Yep.
We'll be following that Saturday night in Indianapolis. By the way, first rematch for Ohio State in a season since 1975.
Right.
Remember that UCLA Rose Bowl?
And that's the only time in a season since 1900 we've played the same team twice.
That's incredible. With all the crazy history of Buckeye football, that's how it worked out there. One last thing, Bill, let's talk about the Buckeyes, and they match up here. They had some pass protection problems this season, as Ohio State. They've given up more sacks than you'd think they would have. Played a little bit better against Michigan, but Wisconsin gave them a lot of trouble up front. I'd imagine the two tackles for the Buckeyes are going to have their work cut out for them.
Absolutely, because they're the second best team in the conference and getting to the quarterback. So we really do have to protect them. Thank goodness we got a quarterback that has got feet. He can move the pocket. He can keep plays alive. And we found out one thing for sure Saturday. He's a tough guy.
Very tough, undoubtedly so. That's a no-brainer. Coach will be back with us in just a little bit to wrap up our shows as we continue here on Path to the Playoff. We're going to move now to the SEC Championship. This is one that everybody has their eyes on across the country. Should be a legitimate four-quarter battle in Atlanta. Georgia remains number 4 in the playoff rankings. If they can knock off LSU Saturday, they're in the playoff. Number 2 scoring, rush defense in the country, allowing barely 10 points per game. They're good. The question is, do the Dogs bring enough offense to offset the LSU offense and their immense talent there? Rex Castillo, sports director at WRBL, joins us now with a look at Georgia's approach for Saturday.
The Georgia Bulldogs will head an hour and 30 minutes west to Atlanta to try and win their second SEC title in 3 years this Saturday. However, standing in their way is what Kirby Smart says will be the toughest test for his defense, the explosive LSU Tigers offense and possible Heisman quarterback Joe Burrow. Something has to give in this matchup. The Bayou Bengals love lighting up the scoreboard, scoring an average of 45 points per game. The wise guys in Vegas think Georgia is the underdog in Atlanta, but Kirby Smart couldn't care less about that.
The people that make those decisions aren't in this room. They're not like in our meeting rooms. They're not in our meetings. They don't go through our practices. So we try to, control what we can control with how we practice and how we get ready. And as many as the games we're favored in, it doesn't matter. So if you're not favored in it, it probably doesn't matter either.
On offense, the Dogs will be shorthanded. Lawrence Cager is out for the season, and star freshman wideout George Pickens is suspended for the first half of this game. So the pressure falls on the defensive unit. That Georgia defense hasn't allowed an opponent to score more than 21 points all season long. They also have 3 shutouts this year. Their mentality is right in line with their head coach.
We just got to just keep playing our game, definitely just owning up to the standard, because we haven't played our best defensive game yet as a unit yet. Seeing their film is just like they have good players, great players actually, so it's just got to dial in and do what we got to do, execute.
We focus on what we got to do to get better. Then, like I said before, good things are going to happen. So we focus on us. Yeah, they're a good offense. Yeah, they're going to make plays, but at the same time, we need to do good and make plays on defense as well.
We'll see if the Dogs defense can hold up against that explosive LSU offense in Atlanta this Saturday. Kickoff for the SEC Championship is set for 4 p.m. Eastern. Reporting on the Georgia Bulldogs for the Gridiron Nation, I'm Rex Castillo.
Outstanding, Rex. Now to the opponent. LSU's offense versus Georgia's defense is going to be ridiculous to watch Saturday. Number 2 total and scoring offense in the country, near 49 points per game, and the likely Heisman Trophy winner, Joe Burrow, continues to put up, I'll put them comical numbers, 44 passing touchdowns. That's tied with Missouri's Drew Lock for the most in a single season of SEC football. That is a lofty standard. To talk more about the Tigers in the title game this weekend, we have a couple reports. We're going to start in New Orleans. Talk to Ed Daniels, the sports director at WGNO there. And Ed, appreciate you joining us here today. That matchup, offense versus defense, steals the headlines. I'm actually just as intrigued by the other side of this. Georgia's offense versus the LSU defense. They're both very talented, but very inconsistent this season. I'm just wondering which side you think might have the edge there.
You know, it's really a good question because, you know, Georgia has a really good offensive line. Jake Fromm, their quarterback, is back. Their running back, DeAndre Swift, is tremendous. I'm really, frankly, surprised that Georgia has struggled offensively because I thought they had all the pieces coming back. And, you know, with that struggles has come an interesting question. Did the wrong quarterback transfer? Because Justin Fields last year at Tiger Stadium in a 20-point loss to LSU played a handful of plays, but most of the time it was Jake Fromm in the game. And, you know, what Justin Fields has done at Ohio State this year, I think that is a legitimate question.
Yeah, very interesting how all that developed there. A lot of quarterback shuffle this past offseason. After this past weekend, speaking of quarterbacks, feels like a formality. Joe Burrow is going to win the Heisman, be the first Heisman winner at LSU in decades. They had their senior day ceremony Saturday night, Death Valley, and that was like watching, I don't know, Ed, it was like watching an old-time movie, a legendary figure coming out for his final send-off. How would you describe that send-off and what he now represents in LSU history?
Well, you know, a few weeks ago, Ed Orgeron said that Joe Burrow was one of the 5 most significant recruits in the history of LSU football, and there's no doubt that he's had a enormous impact on this program. You know, if Joe Burrow's not here last year, LSU was a 10-win team. If he's not here last year, I think they're a 6-win team. If he's not here this year, there's no way that they have wins over Alabama, Florida, and Auburn, and Texas. I mean, Joe Burrow really, you know, I guess I don't want to go too far out on the limb, but when it comes to LSU football, Jared, he's been really a transcendent figure. And what's happened this year is absolutely incredible. I mean, they tacked on 50 on Texas A&M the other night. And they're not bad on defense. They held Georgia to 19. So, you know, no one has stopped LSU thus far. And Joe Burrow has just been unbelievable with his accuracy, his pocket presence, his leadership. He's done it all.
Yeah, great personality, too. He's just a very likable guy and a guy that's a great culture builder. You're right, in that LSU program. Very blunt question. Coach Conley and I are going to talk about this in a few minutes here, Ed. If LSU were to lose Saturday afternoon, are they undoubtedly still in the playoff, or do you think they'd have to sweat it out come Sunday?
I don't think there's any way they sweat it out come Sunday. You look at their resume and all their top 10 wins, I firmly believe that if LSU loses this game, that they'll be the 4 seed and they'll play Ohio State in the semifinals. So I just don't see there's any way you can keep LSU out of this playoff. They've had a perfect regular season. Their resume as far as quality wins is as good or better than any in the country. So I asked Ed Orgeron that question on Monday. He didn't want to answer it. I heard your clip about Ryan Day kind of talking about, getting ready for the Big Ten championship, and that's what LSU's focused on. There's not many opportunities to win SEC championships. Since the turn of the millennium here, LSU had one in 2001, 2003, 2007, 2011. This would be another one, and those are hard things to come by, especially in my opinion. I know your coach might disagree, but the best league in the country. So I think LSU's got to win the SEC championship, but if they don't, and they're 7.5-point favorites, if they don't, without a doubt, unless they lose 62-3, I think they're in the playoff.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really hard argument against LSU if they lose Saturday because their resume
Who's ahead of them?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Who do you put ahead of them?
Who's ahead of them?
Yeah. I mean, who's
ahead of them?
Who's got better wins? Yeah.
Is Oklahoma ahead of them? A one-loss team out of the Big 12? There's nobody you can put ahead of LSU. So to me, they're either the 2 seed going forward and playing Clemson, or they're the 4 seed and they'll wind up playing Ohio State if they can beat Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's a great point, a great argument, one I'm sure the committee has made to themselves when they've had their meetings as they get ready for Sunday. Ed, thanks so much for joining us here. We appreciate all your contributions here along the path to the playoff. And now we're going to switch to the Big 12 title game. The winner there could very well find themselves in the playoff. We'll see. Oklahoma, the #1 total offense in America, powered by Jalen Hurts. They beat Baylor with a dramatic rally a couple weeks ago, and now they're trying to beat the Bears again. Here's K4 Sports Director Brian Brinkley.
Oklahoma's chances at a spot in the college football playoff are looking better and better. The Sooners are coming off their most impressive performance in over a month, beating Bedlam rival Oklahoma State 34-16 on Saturday night for their 5th straight win in the series. The OU defense was especially impressive, getting 2 turnovers and keeping Heisman Trophy candidate Chuba Hubbard in check for most of the night. Now the Sooners set their sights on Baylor and the Big 12 championship game this Saturday in Arlington, Texas. Oklahoma is playing for a 5th straight Big 12 title, and at least one veteran player feels like it's almost an obligation to keep that streak alive.
For us this week, I think the biggest thing is just focusing on us and just going down there and, playing a complete game. But, definitely it's special, giving this program's ability to win 4 in a row and, competing for 5 now.
Oklahoma quarterback Jalen Hurts had a special night against Oklahoma State. The senior rushed for a touchdown, caught a touchdown pass, and threw a touchdown pass against the Cowboys, becoming the first Sooner player to do that in a single game since the great Tommy McDonald back in 1956. Hurts has college football playoff experience with Alabama, so he knows what's at stake when the Sooners play Baylor for the Big 12 title, but he says he and his teammates have to focus only on what they can control when they beat the Bears for a second time.
All of that stuff are kind of things that we can't worry about. Got to worry about winning the day, honestly, dominating the day, dominating tomorrow, getting better every day, and putting ourselves in the best situation as far as going out there Saturday and playing our best ball.
Saturday's rematch between the Sooners and Bears should be a good one. The two teams met 3 weeks ago in a wild one in Waco. Baylor led by as many as 25 points, and the Sooners totally dominated the second half to stage their largest comeback win in school history and beat the Bears 34-31. It's been Baylor's only loss this season, so an Oklahoma win in the Big 12 title game could be even more impressive to the playoff committee. The Sooners head coach says he doesn't know how the committee will view Oklahoma's resume, but he just hopes it's good enough to make one of those top 4 spots.
None of us have any control other than trying to win all the games on our schedule. We've been able to get 11 of the 12 and getting ready to play another really good football team here. So, I know some coaches like to stand up and do the politicking thing. That's just not me. We're going to coach hard and try to win our games, and if you think we're good enough, put us in there. That's about it.
Pretty simple. The Sooners will face Baylor at 11 a.m. Saturday in the Big 12 championship game at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. It's the Bears' first trip ever to the title game. For Oklahoma, they'll be making their 11th appearance in the conference championship game. OU is 9-1 in the Big 12 title game, and they've won 7 in a row. If Oklahoma wins, it will be the first streak of 5 straight outright conference titles for the Sooners since the legendary Bud Wilkinson won 12 in a row from 1948 to 1959. That was the bulk of a stretch where OU won 74 straight conference games. OU has not won 5 straight conference titles, period, since 1972 to 1980. It's been a while. If it's good enough to make the playoff remains to be seen, but the hope is rising in Norman, and you get the feeling if Oklahoma can help themselves with some style points, they will. We'll find out. Jared, back to you.
And I'd imagine there's going to be some points scored there. Baylor, 9-point underdog Saturday. They're also a hungry team to prove that collapse in Waco a couple weeks ago was a blip during an otherwise stellar season. Matt Roberts from KWKT in Waco has the Bears side of it.
The Baylor Bears are back in the national conversation and the college football playoff discussion on the final few weekends for the first time since 2014 when they were left out of the inaugural college football playoff. That year, they did not have that all-important 13th data point of a conference championship game. But this year, they will have it, and it will need to be an exclamation point for the Bears against the Sooners. They will not only need a win, but likely going to need some help in front of them to get into that Final Four. What that help is going to look like, no one really knows at this point. So Matt Rule and his guys are not worried about any of that. They know that they need to win to give the committee something to talk about.
We haven't had a lot of success when we've talked about, hey, if we do this, we get this. You know what I mean? Like, we haven't had a lot of, like last year I did that, and we played really tight against Iowa State and TCU. We've played way better when it's been like, let's just go play. And here's what's special about our players. It's the most competitive group of young people I've ever been around. It's amazing the competitive nature of our guys. So what I've found works with our players is just to say, hey, let's go compete. So to me, when I start talking about CFP and da-da-da-da, it becomes a whole bunch of other stuff, right? When I just say, let's go play, man, we got a special group of kids when we do that.
This is going to be a strength-on-strength matchup pitting the conference's best scoring offense in Oklahoma against the best scoring defense in the Baylor Bears. Baylor fans hoping that old adage about defense winning championships holds true on Saturday morning. Bears no stranger to AT&T Stadium, playing a game against Texas Tech there every year from 2011 through 2018. But going to be playing a much better Oklahoma team who has played in this game in this stadium 3 separate times, including each of the last 2. In Waco for Girdiron Nation, I'm Matt Roberts.
All right, Matt, appreciate that. So the Pac-12 and Utah continues to gain steam in their candidacy for the playoffs, especially with Alabama's loss last week. That really opens the door for Utah. If the Utes put together a big performance Friday night, Pac-12 title game against Oregon, maybe the Utes can get the final spot. They got a really, really strong defense, best in America against the run, number 2 in the country in terms of time of possession on offense, nearly 35 minutes per game. And Utah has some star players, guys like Tyler Huntley, Zach Moss. Those stars really need to shine come Friday. Dana Green from ABC4 in Salt Lake City has the Utes story.
The University of Utah football team, ranked 5th in the college football playoff poll, is going to play for the Pac-12 championship Friday night against number 13 Oregon. Now, the Utes made it to the Pac-12 title game last year and lost a tough 10-3 game to Washington. But they were without starting quarterback Tyler Huntley and starting running back Zach Moss in that game. This year, the Utes have been on an absolute tear. They've won 8 straight games, 7 of them in absolute blowouts. I mean, their average margin of victory this year has been 27 points. This defense is one of the best in the entire country, led by Bradley and Jalen Johnson, and they are motivated to win their first Pac-12 championship Friday night.
Winning the South twice and knowing that we get a chance to finish what we didn't finish last year. That's the best part about it, is, you know, just coming out and winning 11 games, man. That doesn't happen a lot. So we all know what's going on, and we all know that it's a blessing to be in this situation. We just got to finish.
We've talked about it all offseason that, you know, we wanted to be back in this same situation and, you know, wanted to do even bigger things. And so, you know, being back in this situation hasn't been a surprise to us. And so we're just ready to roll, and we're ready to take care of unfinished business.
I noticed the whole team is not as tense as last year leading up to the game. Everybody's loose, everybody's flying around. You could tell it's a bunch of veteran guys who've been there and done that, and so just looking forward to it.
We haven't paid a whole lot of attention to it. I mean, we certainly understand the big picture, but control the controllables, and all we can control is trying to get a win on Friday against Oregon, and then it's out of our hands after that point. So we don't spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Just do what we've been doing the last couple of weeks, you know, trusting the process and things like that, and just being a family, continue to be a brotherhood that we are. So it's really easy when you do those type of things.
I got to believe this is the most talented team we've had here, and you know, at least that since I've been here, and that's a pretty bold statement, because there's been some teams come through here that are really good, but I think when all is said and done and we look back, this may be the best of them all.
As for their college football playoff hopes, well, the Utes say they aren't thinking about that just yet. Yeah, right. But if they beat Oregon and Georgia loses to LSU in the SEC championship, well, the Utes have to be considered the favorites to take over that number 4 spot. And I think the committee feels the same way. Otherwise, they would have put Oklahoma ahead of Utah in the latest rankings. Perhaps the only way Utah doesn't get in with a victory is if they are really unimpressive over the Ducks and Oklahoma just blows the doors off of Baylor. But even though they haven't beaten a current top 25 team this year, and their only losses to USC, with as highly rated as their defense is, the #1 rushing defense in the country with maybe 6 to 8 NFL players on it, and with Heisman caliber numbers being put up by quarterback Tyler Huntley, this team is plenty good enough to lay a claim to a spot in the college football playoffs. For the Gridiron Nation, I'm Dana Green. Jared, back to you.
Dana, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Utah is going to be a fascinating team to watch here Friday. Reminder about the CFP schedule upcoming. We will learn the semifinal matchups again. That's Sunday just after noon. The Fiesta Bowl, the Peach Bowl, serving as the semifinal host this year. #1 ranked team, of course, can choose where they want to play, if they want to play closer to home, etc. We're going to learn the kickoff times for those games shortly after that announcement Sunday. The national championship to be played in New Orleans Monday, January 13th. Coach Bill Connolly rejoins me here in studio as we wrap up our show today. Let's talk a little about the scenario. I asked Ed about LSU. If they lose on Saturday, are they still in? Asking the same question about Ohio State, a 12-0 team trying to go 13-0. If they don't, Bill, are they in?
I think both the 1 and 2 place teams are in. I think Ohio State, LSU, unless they, for some reason, would get blown out, which I don't see happening, they are definitely in. Clemson, on the other hand, not so much. They would be out.
And why so? Because of the strength of schedule?
Strength of schedule. And Virginia, I mean, there's not much chance of that happening. If Virginia would pull the massive upset, then Clemson for sure doesn't deserve to be in top 4.
That's what it would require. It would require that kind of an upset. One more note on the playoff overall, Bill.
Right.
Interesting scenarios of if you're the #1 team, what you want to do. For example, let's say LSU, if they go back to #1, they have a really impressive performance. LSU played in the Fiesta Bowl last year.
Right.
They also will have just played in Atlanta, in the same building where the Peach Bowl is. That puts these schools in a unique position. If it's Ohio State, LSU, whoever that is at #1, it gives you something to think about, and it is a little bit of a tricky decision on what to do.
Yeah, I think you'd probably pick the spot if you have a choice. You want to go closer to your fan base, so that it's easier travel for them.
Mm-hmm. But there's always, scenarios, for example, if you have a great alumni base. For example, the Ohio State folks, they've been in Fiesta Bowl so many times. It's like there's literally a town called Buckeye, Arizona.
Absolutely.
I mean,
I've been there.
I mean, it's almost like a home away from home for them, so you could understand why maybe they would potentially think about playing out there. And then also the matchups are very interesting, Bill.
Yeah.
If form holds this weekend and the favored teams win, who do you think gets the 4th spot?
Well, I think whoever has the most impressive performance. I really think that. Because both those games, Utah's going to be a tough game. So is Oklahoma. With Baylor's defense and Oregon, they can explode offensively at any time. And they've been playing good defense too. But I think whoever has the most impressive performance gets the 4th spot.
And what's your inclination on that, though, about which is the team that's most likely to do that?
I'd say probably Oklahoma.
Because of the offense?
Yeah, and I think the committee would like seeing Jalen Hurts in the playoffs.
Yeah. It'd be interesting, especially if form holds, like we said. If you get Ohio State, Oklahoma in one game, you get LSU and Clemson in the other, you're going to have some television ratings.
Absolutely. Those are 4 great teams.
I'll tell you what, though, the more you watch Utah, Bill, the more you watch them play, the more you watch them run the football, Huntley, Moss, that crew, I think they deserve major consideration to be in that 4th, especially if they play really well Friday.
Oh, they have done a great job of recruiting. To get those types of skilled athletes to come to Utah is amazing. So they definitely deserve recognition.
One other thing I want to ask you about, Bill, when you talk about sizing these teams up for the playoff, for example, what the committee's job is, we've had this big argument about resume versus eye test. When it comes down to Sunday, it seems like sometimes they stray from the metrics they used
it sure does.
to get to the last one. So, Bill, if you're in that committee room, what's the thing you're trying to make the argument to the other committee members of how you're picking the best 4 teams?
Yeah, I think the complete football team. You might have one team that's really superior offensively, another one defensively. I think you look for a team like Ohio State that is balanced, very productive on the offensive side, and extremely tough on defense.
Well, Bill, we got a little surprise for you here. We have at the end of the show here, we thought we would check on one of our Next Star affiliates is literally on the road to Atlanta for the SEC championship game. And we're going to check in with him now. Brian Holland is the sports director there in Baton Rouge. He is literally stopping on his drive over to Atlanta to talk to us today. We got Brian with us live right now. You made it to where? Biloxi, Mississippi? How many Tiger fans do you think are going to try to make that same drive this weekend?
Yeah, welcome to right outside Biloxi, I should say, a little Ocean Springs, Mississippi town. You can see right behind us, we want to get in a game of volleyball, so you interrupted that. But other than that, yeah, we're on the way, on the road there to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And the feeling that I get around town is that this one, look, they haven't been back to Atlanta since 2011. So this is a big one. You've seen Alabama, a little bit of Auburn there in that SEC West representative there in the SEC championship game. But LSU and their fans, especially now going to the new stadium. Remember, last time they were there was the Georgia Dome. They saw Tyrann Mathieu running all over the Georgia Bulldogs. They hope it's the same result. That day was 42-10, but I get the feeling around town and then in New Orleans, all around South Louisiana, that these Tiger fans, they are pumped up to finally see the Bayou Bengals back in that SEC championship game.
Brian, I'm glad that we got to connect with you today. Coach Conley and I were just talking about this point, and I think it's a really interesting point, specifically with LSU, because they played in the Fiesta Bowl just last year, played well. Joe Burrow had a great game. And they're going to play in the same building where the Peach Bowl is. What's your inclination? What are you hearing about what LSU could elect to do if they become the #1 team and have an option here of where they could go play?
Yeah, I actually think that's a really good question because I think it's split right now. You go back to when they were making the SEC championship game every other year, 01, 03, 05, 07. You skipped it in 09, but got back to it in 2011. And when I was covering the team, especially in 2012, they didn't want to go to the Chick-fil-A Bowl. A lot of fans said, oh, we've been to Atlanta. There's a lot of Atlanta fatigue. And I think that you could maybe encounter that, especially going back to Atlanta. Yes, it's only an 8-hour drive there from Baton Rouge, about a 6-hour drive there from New Orleans. It's easy to get to, or at least you can drive it. But I think last year a lot of the fans came back and said, this Fiesta Bowl, it was a great experience. It was a new place. And it was almost kind of a popular view to, hey, you know, next time they go back, maybe we'll go. And so maybe some of those Tiger fans who didn't get to go, who, remember back in the 2000s, kept going to Atlanta over and over and over again, say, hey, let's all take a family trip and go out to Arizona, even though, yes, it's probably a little more expensive of a trip getting out there. I think that that could be one of those kind of popular destinations that Tiger fans maybe be inclined to take.
Oh, it's an incredible bowl game. Coach Conley and I were just talking about that. By the way, Coach has a question for you, Brian.
Oh, and this might be the most asked question this week. What is going to be the spelling on the back of Joe Burrow's jersey? Is it going to be the Cajun version or the straight version?
Well, he had to take that one off, by the way. I don't think the refs were going to allow that. He did have the EAUX, and what a moment inside Tiger Stadium. I mean, I have never seen really kind of a senior day moment quite like that. It was amazing. It was quite the atmosphere. It was quite the night. And I'd say he's now the adopted son of the state of Louisiana. He certainly has endeared himself there, down there to the Go Nation, and, of course, the Cajuns there in South Louisiana.
Yeah, Brian, we were just talking about that moment. It was something out of a movie. I mean, that's an incredible shot from the back of him walking out and the reaction. It was bananas, man. One last thing I wanted to ask you about LSU as we get into this championship weekend. Look, this is a big ask, right? You go into Georgia and take on Georgia with that incredible defense. How do you expect this offense of LSU and that defense of Georgia, when they collide, how do you forecast that coming out? Who has the edge there?
Well, and this was the interesting question. Remember, go back to 2011 when LSU was supposed to play Oklahoma State before, unfortunately, there was an unfortunate plane crash. Then they go up to Iowa State for a Friday night game, a weird Friday night game. They lose there in a last-second play. They were supposed to play the Oklahoma State Cowboys, who had this high-powered offense. So you're going to see the high-powered offense against the high-powered defense and the star-studded defense there for LSU. What was going to give? And my overall philosophy is, look, whatever sport you're talking about, whoever is the aggressor, whoever gets to call the shots, really, whether you're the pitcher on a mound or the offense in football, they're going to be the ones who dictate terms. And LSU has the answer. If they want to put 8 out into the pattern, good luck, trying to tackle, I should say, Clyde Edwards-Elair out there in open space. And then they have the pile driver, Tyron Davis-Price, who's the freshman. So they've got multiple weapons. Look for Justin Jefferson to really have a big game. Everyone's going to be keyed in on Jamar Chase, and then, of course, Terrace Marshall Jr. Justin Jefferson can kind of get in between zones. Georgia loves to play zones, sit back, look at the quarterback, and see where he's going with the football. I really think Justin Jefferson, his job this game is to get in between those tight spaces. I think he's going to have a huge ball game, and LSU has always had an answer. I don't see – remember, go back to Auburn. Look, they only won 23-20. They still put up 500 yards of offense that week.
Yeah.
So as long as they can do well and be efficient in the red zone, they'll be just fine against any defense they face.
Brian, 2 last questions for you. First of all, how many hours are left on your drive? And secondly, when you get to Atlanta, will you go to the varsity?
I have not been to the varsity. Is that the place to go? I do have some of my spots around town.
Okay. No. What's your favorite place?
Well, we're going to go check it out. We've seen it on the highway probably 100 times. Tell you what, this time I'm going to go, and then I'll report back to you, hopefully on the way to the college football playoff semifinal, and we'll tell you how good it was. And, by the way, we're tracking, if you want to go to brproud.com here in the next couple of days, we're tracking a couple of the Cajun chefs, some of the guys with the New Orleans influence, the Baton Rouge influence, who have now made a home in Atlanta, and we're going to have a special piece on that as well. So we'll be just fine with the food when it comes down to dinner time.
I was going to say, man, you guys are hooked up. There's no doubt.
No doubt.
Brian, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking some time out on the road over to Atlanta, and, man, that's going to be a fun one this weekend. Brian, thanks very much for doing it. Bill, one last thought here. As you get into the weekend, it would be a surprise to see any of these big three lose. Who's the most vulnerable, you think, in their game?
Wow, that is a great question. It's sure not Clemson. I would say probably LSU is the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think
because of the Georgia defense?
Yes, because of the defense. Anytime you get teams that are really productive offensively, if you have a bad day, you're going up against a good defense, anything can happen.
Tough one, I think, for Ohio State. I think beating the same team twice is difficult duty.
That's the most part, the difficult part for us this week is Ohio State's got to go against the team they've already beat this week. So no matter how much the coaches preach, you can't think this is going to be an easy game. It's just tough to do that. Get yourself mentally ready. I should tell the audience, by the way, coach coached at Ohio State for many years and played at Ohio State. When he says us, he means Ohio State. Be very clear. I'm not allowed to say that. Coach can say that, and he's earned the right to say that. It has been such a fun last few weeks talking about this playoff race. It's been a great year for it. It's been really exciting to see the teams go up and down. The rankings been special. And we're not done. We're not done. Sunday's going to be very nervous. A lot of nervous fan bases out there all across the country as you go into this championship weekend. So thanks so much for joining us all the past few weeks, all across Nexstar Nation for the Gridiron Nation Path to the Playoff. We'll come back as we get set for the semifinals of this college football season. What a year it's been and what a weekend it's about to be here. Thanks to all the folks who've chipped in on this show over the past few weeks. It really is the most wonderful time of the year. Thanks so much for watching us here.